Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep on prompt engineering.
Okay.
And wow, you've given us a lot to work with.
Yeah.
Notes, articles, even a whole presentation transcript.
It seems like you really want to get a handle on this stuff.
Definitely want to move past just the basics.
Yeah, and it's interesting how in your notes you connect how we prompt with how LLMs learn.
Yeah, it's like we're learning to speak AI,
Right.
but like instead of vocabulary, it's more like we're mastering the grammar.
Uh-huh.
One thing that really stood out from all this material is this idea of tokens.
Okay.
You've like circled it a bunch of times, underlined it, seems super important.
Oh, yeah. Tokens are like fundamental to how LLMs understand language.
Okay.
They're the smallest unit of meaning the model can work with.
So it's not just like feeding it full sentences then.
No.
Breaking everything down into these tokens first.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And keep in mind that each LLM has its own vocabulary of tokens.
Oh, so it's not universal.
Right. Each one has its own way of sort of dissecting language.
Yeah. In your presentation, you even had that slide comparing it to like deciphering a code.
Right.
If we didn't get the code, we can't talk to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. A good analogy.
So the more we know about these tokens, the better we can craft our prompts.
Exactly. The more you understand about how a specific LLM uses them, the better you can tailor your prompts to get what you want out of it.
Okay, so tokens are like the foundation.
Yeah.
But you've also highlighted this thing about context, like giving the LLM background.
Context is key.
It seems really important.
Absolutely. It's like asking someone, how do I get carrots? But you don't tell them anything else.
Right.
You don't tell them where you are, what you're trying to do, if you even mean the vegetable.
Haha, I remember that from your presentation. I was laughing.
Right. It could tell you to go to the store. It could tell you to plant a garden.
Or go foraging,
Yeah, exactly.
wild carrots.
The more specific the context, the better the LLM can understand what you're really asking.
Okay, so instead of being vague, we give it the full roadmap.
Yeah.
What are some ways we can actually do that effectively?
There are a bunch of techniques, and you seem really interested in personas.
Yeah, that one really caught my eye, telling the LLM to act like a certain kind of expert before we ask the question.
Right.
Almost like role-playing.
Yeah, a persona prompt tells the LLM, okay, you're a financial advisor now, or you're a historian.
And that gives it a certain set of knowledge and changes how it talks.
Exactly. It influences its tone and style.
So if I'm researching a historical event, I should tell it, be a historian.
Yeah, and that'll shape how it answers.
Okay, cool. Another technique you mentioned was few-shot inference.
Uh-huh. Sometimes called in-context learning.
Right, and it seemed like we were teaching the LLM by example.
That's a good way to think about it.
With few-shot inference, we give it a few examples of input and output before the real question.
Exactly.
So if I wanted to translate something specific, I first give it examples of similar translations.
Right. You're showing it the pattern you want it to follow.
Gotcha.
which can be really helpful for complex tasks.
Okay, then there's this chain of thought prompting, which seemed really wild.
Yeah.
It was like asking the LLM to show its work, not just the answer.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
In your notes, you even said just adding the phrase, think step by step,
Yeah.
can make it more accurate.
Yeah.
It's like giving it a little cognitive nudge.
It is, and it shows how important it is to understand how LLMs process information.
By asking it to explain itself, we can make it more reliable.
And transparent, yeah.
These techniques already seem really powerful.
They are.
But from your notes, it looks like we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot more to uncover.
This is exciting.
It is, yeah, a whole world of advanced techniques.
One that I saw you playing around with in your notes was this meta prompting.
Right.
It's like using AI to get better at using AI. It
Yeah.
blew my mind.
It's a powerful tool. Think of it that way.
Yes,
With meta prompting, you're basically asking the LLM to help you get better at prompting. So I could ask it to like check my prompts or even come up with totally new ones.
Yeah, based on what you want to do.
It's like having an AI prompt consultant.
Exactly. And you can even use it to see if your prompts have any biases or weaknesses.
Huh. So it's like another set of eyes, but like super analytical eyes.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I could see how that would be super useful.
Okay. If you're serious about prompt engineering, this is a game changer.
And the more you use it, the better you get at it, right?
Exactly. The
Yeah.
more you use meta prompting, the more you understand about LLMs and how to craft really effective prompts.
Another thing that jumped out from your notes was all the stuff about markdown and delimiters.
Uh-huh.
It seems like these technical details are just as important as the creative stuff
Absolutely. Markdown helps make your prompts clear and structured.
for both us and the LLM,
Right. And delimiters like those triple backticks help separate different parts of the prompt.
so it doesn't get confused.
Exactly.
You even had that analogy about a well-organized toolbox.
Yeah. The right tools and a clear system make everything so much more efficient.
So markdown and delimiters are like labeling your tools and putting them back in the right spot.
Exactly. It might seem small, but it makes a big difference.
In one of your notes, you had this really interesting example where you were researching web frameworks
Yeah.
using an LLM, and you talked about using a specific prompt structure that was like a roadmap for the whole research process.
Huh.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. That was an example of what I call a disposable chat prompt.
Disposable chat.
Yeah. It's for when I'm focused on just one specific task.
Okay.
So instead of just asking a question, I give it a framework for how I want the information.
Like a plan.
Exactly.
You walk through the prompt step by step, and it started by telling the LLM to act like a software consultant.
Right. Someone who specializes in web frameworks.
Okay, so that sets the scene.
Yeah. And then I give it details about the project, the goals, the limitations, even my own preferences.
You were super specific in your example, saying you needed a framework that works with TypeScript and has a big community.
Being clear about those things, make sure the LLM gives me recommendations that are actually useful.
And save time.
Exactly. No need to go back and forth a bunch of times.
And then things got really interesting. You actually told the LLM how to do the research.
Yeah, I outlined the different phases, like gathering information, comparing options, then going deeper into specific frameworks.
Like a research plan.
Right. It keeps the conversation focused and makes sure we cover everything.
It's almost like you're collaborating with the LLM, not just telling it what to do.
That's a great way to put it.
You give it guidance and structure, but it gets to do its thing.
Exactly. Processing information, making connections.
And you said it was important to tell the LLM to stick to each phase until you say it can move on.
Yeah, without those instructions, it can jump ahead or get distracted.
Which can mess everything up.
Right.
So you're training it to follow a workflow.
Which makes things more predictable and consistent.
It seems like you put a lot of thought into this prompt.
I did. Creating these structured prompts takes time.
So it's good to save them.
Exactly, so you can use them again.
You even had a name for them, reusable prompts.
Right. It's like building your own library of prompt blueprints.
I love that. And just like with metaprompting, you can ask an LLM to help you create and refine them.
Absolutely. It's all about building a toolkit for effective LLM interaction.
So we've got these detailed prompts like mini programs
Yeah.
that guide the LLM, but how do we actually get them in there?
That's where understanding how LLMs process language comes in.
Right, going back to those tokens.
Exactly. Yeah, they're how the LLM breaks down our language into something it can understand.
Right, but how does that help us write better prompts?
Well, LLMs have this thing called a context window. It's basically how much text they can handle at once. And knowing how an LLM tokenizes your prompt and how much of that fits in the window is super important.
So if my prompt is too long after it's tokenized, the LLM might miss some stuff.
Yeah, it might forget the beginning and then the output won't make sense.
Oh, I see. So that's why we need to use markdown headings, lists, delimiters.
Right, it helps keep everything organized and within that context window.
Like giving it a map instead of just a jumbled mess of instructions.
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier that we've only just scratched the surface.
We have.
Are there any other like super advanced techniques that we should know about?
There's one you kind of touched on in your notes that I think is really interesting, prompt chaining.
Prompt chaining.
Yeah. Does that ring a bell?
Kind of, but I'd love to hear more about it.
Okay, so imagine instead of trying to solve a huge problem with one massive prompt, you break it down into smaller ones.
Okay.
Each prompt builds on the one before it, so it's like a step-by-step process.
Like a workflow for the LLM.
Exactly, and it's really useful for tasks that have lots of stages, like gathering information, analyzing it, putting it all together.
So when would we actually use prompt chaining?
Let's say you're a marketer and you need help with a content strategy for a new product. Instead of just asking, create a content strategy, you use prompt chaining.
How would that work?
Your first prompt could be something like, I'm launching a new product in the whatever market. What are the best platforms to reach my audience?
Okay, so the LLM would give you a list.
Right? And then you use that list for the next prompt.
So the output of one becomes the input for the next.
Exactly. The next one could be, okay, given these platforms, what kind of content will work best before the launch?
So you're guiding it through these smaller questions.
And building on the answers.
This is blowing my mind.
It's a really powerful technique.
We're making it easier for the LLM and we have more control.
Exactly. Prompt chaining lets you fine-tune things at each step, so the final result is what you actually want.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've gone from the basics of language all the way to these crazy advanced techniques.
Like meta prompting and prompt chaining.
It's clear that prompt engineering is so much more than just typing stuff into a chatbot.
It really
It's
is.
a skill, an art, a science.
And it takes practice and a deep understanding of how LLMs work.
Like you said earlier,
Huh.
this is just the beginning.
Yeah,
There's always more to learn and discover in the world of prompt engineering.
exactly. That's what makes it so exciting.
The more we know about these models, the better we can use them.
And shape the future.
Thank you so much for taking us on this deep dive into prompt engineering.
My pleasure.
We hope you've learned a ton and are ready to explore the amazing world of LLMs.
It's a wild world out there.
That's for sure.
Have fun with it.